So there we are, Salabizz, the magic incantation to bring this digital workshop into being. Learning, and there's a really crucial word in everything that we're hoping to do, learning through business simulations. And by the end of this workshop, we hope that you will have learned something new, and certainly have met new people that you can take into the future, those meetings. But you've learned something new, and you're perhaps encouraged to think about using business simulations in your own practice. Just a few reminders about how to operate the various buttons to use the chat, to use the microphone muting, please, if you're not speaking. Keep focused on what's going on, but if you do have trouble with the internet and you have to go out, just come back in again. Teresa is going to be there to let everyone back in again. And if you can avoid any distractions, you're going to get the most out of this activity. I want to introduce you to today's team. I'm chairing this session. My name's Keith Pond. I'm the director of EOCCS. So for the certifications that the EFMD Global Online Course Certification System, so we manage that whole process, and there's lots of excellent institutions at various stages in that process to gain the EOCCS certification for things from MOOCs all the way up to modules in MBA and key programs that are offered by the schools that are part of the system. So that's me. I'm also a user of games, as I will explain. Unfortunately, we advertised that Rob Alvarez from IE Business School will be with us today, but he unfortunately can't be. He's been taken ill, and but he's left us with a very good set of instructions of what to do. Rob actually provides separate a course on gamification via EFMD. So if you do want to take this further, you'll meet Rob if you register on one of those courses. But the people who are here, Angela Fiegel and my very good friend Klaus, and I met these two, I met Klaus, but I met Angela online as I was preparing a project for my university, Loughborough in the UK, preparing a project where we were attempting to bring European universities together. I know Klaus is going to talk a little bit more about that, but 4 European universities together to compete in a simulation, as a competition, as a pilot, because this had been done face-to-face previously, but never completely online. It was a successful project, and really encouraged by Rob and his colleagues at IE, who really sort of inspired me to think about how we could use gamification to give a better experience. Today's agenda looks like this. I'm setting the context, and I've about finished with that. And then I'm going to ask Angela to speak about simulations. She'll then introduce a trial simulation that you are going to participate in, and the gameplay in breakout rooms will happen after that. We've got, after the games, the simulation happens, Klaus will talk about using sims in the classroom or in the virtual classroom, and the results then of the simulation that you have used will be presented. After that, plenty of opportunity for questions and answers. So if I can hand over to Angela, but not before reminding everyone that we have an online learning community page on the EFMD website. If you look on the EFMD global website, go there to learning and networking. One of the top things is there, the online learning community. Bookmark us because it changes all the time and you will keep up to date with events, blogs, courses that we are offering. So, Angela, can I hand the microphone to you?
Please do. So thank you very much. If you can just make sure that the picture is showing. So I can talk a little bit about gamification and simulations in that sense. Just very quickly talk about my own experience. I've been an instructional designer and leadership trainer and coach for longer than I want to remember. And I came across, the game, gamification, if you, is a relatively new term. Before that, we called it, learning games and sometimes, action learning and all these kind of things. But give or take 15 years ago, that term of gamification came along. And from my own experience, if you can just click on next, Keith, or yes, thank you. That's what I wanted to show. I had a very interesting experience one day because my family for about 5 to 6 years didn't talk to me about my work at all. When I was younger, they were always asking. And then suddenly when I started talking about Sims and all these things, they stopped talking to me. And I really wondered why that was. And then one day I sat them down at the end of a family dinner and I was like, listen, I'm just curious. Why are you, not talking to me anymore? Why are you not really, interested in my job? And they said like, well, I mean, what you're doing is kind of, not ethically really correct, right? And I was like, what? Because they actually thought when I talked about gamification at the beginning and how fantastic that is in Sims, they actually thought I was doing gaming. I was kind of working somewhere where there is, like in a casino or something along those lines. So they made a link somehow between gamification and gaming, because that's the first thing, games. And if it's games, how it can be learning. And if it's games, how it can be serious. So that's when I started, taking a step back before I even talk about simulations and before I actually use the word gamification. I kind of tried to set the stage a little bit and talk about what is behind it and what it actually is. No, that's perfect, Keith. Yeah, very, very absolutely on time and really good for the next slide. And games are serious in a sense of why they have a tremendous amount of impact. If you look in, Candy Crush, everybody knows Candy Crush, whether you want to admit that you play it or not. Maybe at least your children play it. Look at the amount of hours per year in the US only that people spend on that game. Or Pokemon Go, if you remember, that emerged at some point and became Harry Potter Go, and then it kind of disappeared again. 8.6 billion kilometers walked in the first month that the game came out. That's 4.5 billion miles. Game of Thrones, remember that series that everybody was about? Yes, there's a game and you have a dragon and you can fight for dominion, and you have your teams and you fight against other teams. 19 to 21 million per month spent, because you have to spend money to upgrade your dragon or do all these kind of things and buy new resources. Even if you don't really want to spend money, you'll end up spending at least a couple of bucks here and there. So that is what games do. Games kind of engage people into some kind of a behavior. And that, without saying Pokemon Go or Game of Thrones or all these kind of things are good or bad, they are around and they have triggered something. They have triggered something that creates behavior for people. And that is really the part where, very smart people around the world have gotten curious. And they were like, what is it? What is it that makes people so so, engaged in the game? What is it that, I don't have to tell my child to play one of his apps, but I do certainly have to remind him 20 times per day to do his homework. So what is it that, there, even though it's repetitive, even though it's, sometimes very tedious, what is it that really makes people continue a game, no matter how tedious it is? And, with stuff like homework or cleaning up your room, or maybe even do some administrative task, it's so much harder, and learning in general. And that is where gamification, in terms of the term, came about. And here's one of the definitions that I found is the closest to really trying to understand what this is about. The process of adding games or game-like element to something, in this case, learning, and we're going to talk about what simulations do with there, that encourages participation and creates some kind of a behavior. So it's basically taking what makes games so fun and so, memorable and so engaging and so sometimes addictive, and transferring it to a non-game context. What you see down here is a very scary graph. It's for those that really want to dive a little bit deeper into gamification at some point. It's the so-called octalysis. It's a gamification grid that you can lay over as an analytical grid over what are the elements. There's a very smart gentleman from Japan that has really gone into the deep dive there, and he has identified these kind of 8 elements of gamification, you want to call it, with sub elements, and try to explain these are the things that make game or gamification so powerful. So you have that meaning in there, you have the empowerment, you're doing something, social influence, which very much, we're social creatures, we do stuff together, the unpredictability or in the scarcity, so you don't know what's going to happen next, scarcity of resources, scarcity of all kinds of things, the ownership. You really, if you have played a game, you create a profile and this is yours and you want to level up, this accomplishment that is there, to getting from one level to the other. So all these elements he has put together with these sub elements, and he said, okay, you can lay that grid over, and that will kind of help you to understand how you can transfer something that a game has to a non-gaming context. Let me show you that you see there. We're not going to show the video per se. It's a link. It's a YouTube video, but we want to be respectful of bandwidth and all these things, and sometimes that might be tricky because not everybody might have a strong enough connection to visualize the video. The link will be there, and we'll be sharing the slides later, or you can just type it on YouTube yourself. It's called the fun theory, for those that haven't heard it, from Volkswagen. That was a few years ago that Volkswagen started that, and they made a competition. It was a global competition where they said, come with an idea that changes behavior of people to something that is fun. They called it the fun theory. They didn't call it gamification, probably because they didn't want to get into the game. But whether it's fun or gamification is actually the same thing. So there was a lot of different things. There was a garbage can that whenever you threw a recycling thing in there, it's created a sound. Very simple. Or trying to encourage people to take steps instead of the elevator, escalator. So they made the steps like looking like a piano. So people, when they were walking up, it actually made music. And then you had more and more people taking the stairs because it was fun instead of taking the escalator. And the one that won, and that was that video is about, it was called the speed lottery. What it actually did is, that all of us are driving our car. We really hate it when there's the sign that says, yeah, it's limited to 30 miles or 30 kilometers an hour. And then you get flashed and you get a ticket at home. So they turned the same principle around. So there was this little camera that was filming people, and it showed your speed. And it basically said, whoever is under the speed level, it was like, thumbs up, you're under the speed limit, and you got a lottery ticket at home, because all the money that was from people that got fined for driving too fast, that money was put into a lottery, and all the people that during that period were driving under the speed limit, they got that lottery ticket and they got the chance to win that money. Fantastic video. Watch it when you have the time. It kind of explains how just the fact that there was a kind of camera then, and it was like speed lottery and people were getting tickets at home, how people, you know, were changing their behavior and driving slower and really paying attention. So sometimes, you know, back in the days we were talking about intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. Here we're really tapping into the full power of intrinsic motivations that games create, and that's what we call gamification. So until now, I guess that makes sense. So now you're going to be wondering maybe, why is she talking about that when we're actually here to talk about simulations? Because gamification is the magic ingredient that makes simulations so powerful and so exciting and so engaging. So if you can switch to the next slide, Keith, please. Let me tell you a little bit about what simulations do and why gamifications in training. Simulation is kind of, as business simulation is kind of the essence of gamification in training. Just very quickly, because before I go around that circle once, what I call a business simulation is a simulated environment that is there, you know, kind of has a business context to it. I know it's pretty large, but it's still not as large as whatever conceptions are around. There's a lot of things that are called simulations. Here we very specifically, and we're going to give a lot of examples, and you're going to be able to have the opportunity to try it out. The simulations we're using is a simulated business environment. It can be as small as a company, you know, representing different parts or you know, different segments of that company and seeing how they play together. It can be a little bit of a larger ecosystem, like a market or a sub-market or a country. It can be as wide as an industry, or it can even be larger. It could be a global simulation. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a business context to it, that's what we call a business simulation. And if you look at things and you're in learning, so if you look at what I like to call the root canal of training, like you know, business acumen or finance. I know that Klaus is going to look at me because that's one of his main topics. These kind of trainings that nobody ever wants to do, or if you look at something that might be very theoretical, like what is it and what is market analytics? What is, you know, how do I find my customer segment? Or even, you know, how do I make my department more profitable? Should I engage into digital transformation or not? No matter what it is that you tackle, by representing this in an ecosystem and making people do active decisions there, that is really what you know, what triggers the learning. We had a conversation before this started, and I said, you know, we're all in learning and in teaching to a certain extent, and the one and only thing I think we all agree is the one thing that teaches you most is the you know, life itself. Life is really what is the best teacher out there and the best learning environment. Simulations are the next best thing to life itself. Life itself has the disadvantage that, well, there's no second chances. It's not a very safe environment. You make a decision and then, you know, something happens and you cannot really backtrack, right? You cannot like, okay, can somebody rewind? I'll try this again. And there's, you know, sometimes learning can go through a lot of pain. The simulation takes all of that away by still having the same benefits, because our brain will not differentiate between the real decision that you're making in a real environment and one that is simulated, meaning one that is fake and safe and a really good happy spot for people to be. So when you look here at the circle that you see in here, that is why simulations are so powerful, and these are the things that they tap into in gamification principles. There's the collaborative aspect. There's this, you are somehow in this together. It's a group learning thing. You are in teams competing against other teams, or even you're alone but still competing against others, or you're working with all the other teams to achieve a common goal. There is something very collaborative about it. There's the instant feedback. Don't we all wish that sometimes we do things and instantaneously someone would tell us, yay, or well, maybe try again? Perfect. Sims do that. You make decisions and there is, you know, a feedback that you get and a debrief and some help there, and then you can try again. Same like games do, right? Sorry, you failed. Please try that level again. That's kind of the same principle there. No, I'm not there yet. Thank you. Sorry, Keith. Or am I already late in time? No, right? No. Thanks. There's the competitiveness. We are, at the end of the day, we are very competitive, and competition to a certain extent, or scarcity of something, creates more engagement and creates more drive, and that is really something in a lot of simulations. We use that in our advantage, and we use that to create that engagement. There is the skills and knowledge-based assessment part. Is really about practicing real things. So it's something that is relevant, that has a context to it, that is something that really applies it. If you explain to somebody how a P&L works or a balance sheet, I mean, I know they tried to explain that to me 300 times during my studies. It was only when I went through a sim and I actually had to try to run my own company for a couple of years in the sim that I suddenly was like, oh, that's what they were going on about when they were talking about contribution margin and profit, right? So this kind of thing that you have in there, engagement kind of comes through all of that and makes sense. Social skills really nicely. You will have to negotiate with others. You will have to work in a team. You will have to communicate. You have to do these things. And then, of course, and not the least, this growth ownership empowerment segment, really something that talks about or triggers that, I'm doing stuff. It's not somebody explaining things to me, but this is mine. I run that company, I run the department, I make these decisions, and then I see what happens. And while still never to forget that safe space around it, because it's a learning space, it's really, really safe. And the main purpose is to fail quickly, fail fast, and learn from that. I'm always happy when my teams makes mistakes and fail, because that will allow them to learn better. So let me, yes, so now it's time to move to the next slide. We will make you experience a simulation in a couple of moments. We're just ironing out some last minute data things, because we want to make sure that it's open for everybody and you don't run into any validation or whatever issues. While we getting that ready, what is it that we're going to be asking you to do, or what is it that we want you to experience? From my many years of experience trying to talk about simulations, there is one thing to talk about it, even with the most emotion in your voice. It's not the same thing as you haven't experienced it. It's like as if I was talking you through how it is to ride a roller coaster. I can do my very best, but actually riding the roller coaster once is really what helps you to understand and get that emotional connection to it. The same thing we're going to be doing here. So in a couple of moments, we're going to send a link and you can just click on that link. We're going to put you out in breakout rooms. We're going to give you a very, very, very accelerated version of a simulation, because with, I'm going to go through what is here on the slides so you understand a little bit what it is about. But simulations are usually a little bit more time consuming, a little bit more complex. Even in their least complex version, we're talking about a couple hours, 3 hours at the minimum, to kind of make sure that the experience sticks. And there's almost no limit to how long it can last, as long as it makes sense pedagogically. And so we cannot do that here. It's a webinar, it's 90 minutes, so we're very restricted in time. So we kind of give you a very, very short accelerated version of it, where you're going to be sending to teams like our participants would be. You're getting a story. So there's always a story in the sim. There's always a kind of context setting. There's, you're in that and that industry. You are running this and this company. This is your, market environment. This is what your consumers do. This is what your market does. So this context setting, and this is a story, and through that storytelling you're immediately drawn in. You understand, like it would be in a game, you immediately understand, okay, this is my environment, this is what I have to do. You always get a very specific assignments. So here too, you will get one. You will be managing one company and you have to make business decisions for that company. So the assignment is very clear. Analyze, what's going on, make decisions for that company. The scope of this can be wide or large. In this case, we went super, super, super large because we don't have much time, but the granularity of those decisions can be actually quite big. There will always and always be lots and lots of data. So that is something, it will feel overwhelming even for you, even if I'm preparing you for it like I'm doing right now. This will feel like, what? She wants me to read all this and understand all this and get that data out. That is always on purpose, because it's supposed to feel overwhelming. We're making sure that, we practice that skill of, where's the essential bit of information we need here and now for that decision making. And that is really what we want to practice. So if you feel overwhelmed, bear with it. That is on purpose, and it's always the case and always will be. There's never enough time. Scarcity, I told you about that. There's always scarcity. Resources, and time is one of the resources. We never give you enough time. Even if I gave you 3 hours for this assignment, you would still say, are you kidding me? And you always make sure that there is that, you know, time pressure there, because it forces people to get into stress mode. And if you go into stress mode, you reveal your real behavior. That is important. Why? Because in all other situations, people can fake behavior or can be at their very best behavior. You know, no, I'm negotiating really nicely with all my friends here. Never happens when stress reveals real behavior, and that's what you want. You want to pinpoint that. You want to make people understand when they have stress, they fall into muscle memory, they fall into learned behavior, and that is exactly your sweet spot, what you want to modify. There should then always be guided reflection. You don't want to people be alone with the stress. You want them to go through it. Of course, there's a little bit of pain and discomfort, but you need to take it to some positive place. This is why we did it, and this is what the good stuff happens there. Reflect on it, debrief on it. We guide you through it. You don't let them alone. You don't let them, you know, don't throw them in the ocean and tell them, if you don't swim, drown, not my problem, right? So there's always this guided reflection part that should be in there. And Angelo, thank you so much. I don't know, I see your video, and for your others, I see you nodding a lot, and that really makes me feel good, because I know you're a gamification expert. So I'm quite sure if you're nodding to what I'm saying, then I'm still spot on. Other things are accelerated team building, trying to very quickly understand who has what skill, divide and conquer. What can we do here to, you know, break it down into more sizable bits? Tasks and deliverables. Here, you're just going to make decisions. Many times you can add super stuff on that, projects or presentations or elevator pitches or Shark Tank, whatever what's. There's a lot of different other things, even role play you can throw into Sim and add on. It's plug and play that will allow you to go further. All of this creates an environment for retrieval learning by doing, and a very cyclical, progressive approach to learning, because it's never only one round. Yes, here we do run because we don't have more time, but this is usually at least 2, 3, 4, really to make sure that, you know, they can learn from it, you know, this plan, do, checked, act, circle, you know, and go over it. Oh, I understood what I did wrong, where I went wrong. I want to do it better, because the next round I want to do better. And the more you go through this, you know, the more the learning also sticks. The Trojan horse, I put it there. I know, you know, sometimes people are like, well, you know, a Trojan horse in software, that's not really where we want to go. It's still the very best image I find, because when you tell people they have to learn, or there's something they need to learn, there can be sometimes, okay, I mean, I know all of this already, etc. When you tell them, listen, we're going to go through an interactive case study. I want you to solve that case. I want you to do this. They don't think about learning at all, but they will be learning, because the case study serves as a Trojan horse for learning, and that really helps to pass on whatever messages and whatever learning objectives you want to plug and play on there will work. So I talked a lot. I'm going to send you into a doing in a second, but before I do that, yeah, very quick pause and tech. Okay, fantastic. So what will be happening next is I'm posting now a link in the chat. This is the same link for everybody. Please don't, you know, just open that link up. So you see a link. Oh, no, this went directly to Teresa. I didn't want to do that. I'm sending it to everyone. Here we go. So this is a link, and this is the link to the platform. Please don't leave me just yet. Bear with me for instructions for 2 seconds. Please, please, please. In a few seconds, you will be sent into breakout rooms. We're going to put you in teams of 4 or 5 people, and you will click on the link. Please, when you join the session, remember that number you have. It might say you're joining team group 1, 2, 3, 4. Just remember what number that is, because when you go on the platform, you click on that link. When you log in there, you will see it will make sense. So you will click on that link. It will send you on a web page. There will be the third one from the top. It's called Salabizz. This is the name of the session. This is where you want to go. You click on there, join. You will see that it says group 1, 2, 3, all the way to 20. We're not that many, but it doesn't matter. You click on the one of your team or of your group. So everybody that will be in breakout session room 1 clicks on group 1, breakout session 2, etc. Again, this is a 29-page case study. No, you cannot read it in 20 minutes, even if you're Superman. The point here is not to read it. It's just to give you an understanding of how overwhelming that feels when you get that information that you can never sift through. You do your very best. I would recommend, and you people never follow instructions, but I still recommend, spend the first 5 to 10 minutes to try to understand what is this about, try to make sense of it, and then spend the last 5 to 10 minutes to see what are the decisions they're asking us to make, and let's just make them with the best possible, way that we can. Reading the reports, you won't have time. I'm telling you right now, if you're really good, you might get through the business news and the kind of economical thing. It's a case study, so you understand that it's, in the transportation, car manufacturing industry. So that's kind of what the background is. The goal is for all the teams to submit their decisions before the timer goes out to the best of your abilities. And you will see how quickly competitiveness kicks in when I tell you we will share the results and see which team did best at the end. Okay, so again, click on that. You move all the way down. Once you're in your breakout rooms, you know what number that is. You click on that one, you keep going. Klaus and I will jump around in the teams, just quickly troubleshoot if anything's going on. We'll set a timer. We'll regularly remind you about the time is running out. And then we'll see you back here in the main session in 20 minutes sharp. Okay, Theresa, you can work your magic and send everybody off. And remember to remember the group name you're in, so you can click on the right case study.
Okay, good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
Have fun.
Great.
Welcome back,
Great.
everybody. I hope you all pressed on submit. If you didn't, now is your last chance. As I said, one per team is perfectly fine. This is, like I said, a very accelerated version, but some of the excitement / frustration / things should be the same. That's where we're heading with this. In a real simulation environment, what usually happens when people submit is we need to run the numbers and see what happened there. So that's the usual part where somebody else takes over and plays the magic in the front. Like, look what I'm doing here, so you don't see what I'm doing there. So that's exactly what happens now. So I'm handing over because I'm going to disappear for the numbers. Handing over to my colleague, Klaus.
Yes, Angela, thank you. Did you see all the submissions already?
Yes, looks like submissions are here.
So you should get from 6 teams. Great.
Hey.
Good. So good luck with the evaluation. I will go on. Hello again. I met some of you in the breakouts, which is 3 teams out of 6. So I'm Klaus Walter. I'm talking to you from Dublin, Republic of Ireland. And I'm running my company here, a corporate development company, and I'm also teaching in business school. So that's why I would like to give you some ideas now, best practices on accumulative learning by business simulations in higher education institutions. So what does that mean, cumulative learning? It is about the accumulation of learning in a subject through the layering of one experience upon another. And eventually the level of complexity increases then from stage to stage. And next one, so next slide, please. So I started to introduce that in all the higher education institutions I did teach, or I do teach. So the examples here are just 4 of a higher number. Let me give you an idea on that. So in 2018, when I was teaching in Griffiths College in Dublin, I had the opportunity to redefine, to redo, to rewrite the curriculum of one of the modules, which was the entrepreneurial innovation module in a postgraduate course, as you can see here. And so that was a good opportunity to include a business simulation. In the past here, the learners, well, the job of the learners was to write a business plan. But in a master course, I thought this is too boring, because they probably did that already in the bachelor degree. Now, and there's also another opportunity or advantage by doing that. You really live with that. You can feel what's going to happen. You're not looking into a case study. You're not looking into a business plan, which will always be a fictitious one, and you never ever will find out if that idea, that business idea, is really working. But with the simulation, and that's what I'm gonna tell you a little later, you will see that. So that's one good example. The other one was in Independent College in Dublin, in the strategic management module. We had a trial run of a simulation over 2 semesters, and this worked very good. So students were happy to do that, a new thing. We're gonna have that in the future in strategic management modules there as well. Then in Germany, back in Germany, you know, I'm German and I relocated to Ireland 4 years ago. So I was also teaching in Germany in a tourism and event management bachelor's degree. And here we simulated a destination management. So that was introduced in 2016 there. Finally, and that's what Keith mentioned earlier, in the last year, at the beginning of the last year, we did that European university competition. I will give you some more ideas on that in a moment. So simulations can be, and that's what Angela talked about, simulations can be general business related or industry related. So there are a couple of simulations based on manufacturing or on hospitality or banking or insurance, whatever you like. Or simulations can be subject related. So there are loads of marketing related, supply chain related, finance for managers or for non-financial managers. And the good thing is, that's very important to say here, in times of pandemics or pandemic-related lockdowns, simulations are totally flexible. So you can use that in classrooms as blended approach or fully online. And that's what we all did the last 18 months. And there's no problem. So to switch over from classroom teaching to online, that worked pretty well. Since in the class we also have teams, like you did in a couple of moments earlier. You will ask now, what number of students do we need, or what's the class sizes? So that some more information on that on the next slide. So you can do that even with a handful of learners. So I would recommend that a minimum of 8 learners should be needed. So then you can form 4 teams of 2. That works pretty well for part-time evening classes. And the maximum I did was with 100 learners. So that's for full-time subject-related classes in the more general management-related business simulations. So you see, it even works with a high number of students in the class or in the meeting, so to say. I think it will even work with more than 100 learners, but then well, there's a need to divide the students into 2 or 3 segments. So depending on the subject, simulations run over 4 to 8 periods. On the next slide, you will see an example with 6 periods, and this is an intracurricular example. So you will also see the corresponding semester weeks down there. And that's the approach we did in Independent College in Dublin. with theory blocks and the practice blocks. So you can easily, well, make students learn how to apply the theory in practice. So that is a good theory practice transfer. And theory and practice so are presented in chunks. So on a 12-week semester, that works pretty well with 6 business years. Yeah, as you saw earlier in the breakouts, you will always work on one period, and then the facilitator or the lecturer or the moderator, whatever you like, will stop that after a certain period of time, and you will see the results then, and based on the results then you go on with the next period. And that's what I'm always calling a cumulative learning and teaching approach. So on the next slide there is a little bit more in here, but you see it's based on 8 periods. And with some ideas what's happening during the 8 periods. So at the beginning, of course, the students will be divided into teams. Usually I am also taking 4 to a maximum of 6 students per team. But to be honest, 4 to 5, that's an optimum. And a couple of things will happen here over time, so that the level of complexity will be increased and increased and increased until the end of the semester or until the end of the periods here. And well, I won't go into all the details here, but you see that there is something happens here. A product will be introduced, or a new generation of a product will be introduced. Or the company is going to develop a new market, or a combination of that. There is a lot of financial input in here, so that even if you're not studying financial management, you will learn a lot. Yeah? That the approach is learning by doing. And here the focus is on strategy development. And you can easily find on my slide here, if you are an expert in that, you can easily find, for example, Ansof's 4 strategies in here. So the penetration strategy, the market development strategy, the product development strategy, and even the diversification strategy. So that's a really interesting approach, and this can also be organized intracurricular, but also extracurricular in a block of 3 days or so. On the next, you will see some more details on this university competition, which was, I think, with one exception, an extracurricular approach organized by Keith. So thank you again, Keith, for for having this opportunity, organized by Loughborough University. The other 3 universities that did participate in that was the University of Latvia in Riga and Liechtenstein, and the University of Malta. Well, this was based on a banking simulation, so the so-called X-Bank project. That's what Keith mentioned earlier. And well, this, as I said, was an extracurricular approach. All students were very excited and very ambitious. And as you know, one goal of the simulation at the end is always to find out a winning team. So there is a competition. That's what you couldn't really feel by just doing 20 minutes of a period. But if there would be more than one period, then you would really feel that the competition can quickly heat up. Now, back on the next one. some more input on here, the cumulative cycle of learning. So usually the simulation starts with the, well, dividing students into teams, analyzing the status quo of the company or of that business. That's what you did very quickly within the first 10 minutes in the breakout session. Also by, well, in a real class or in a real subject in university or business schools, the facilitator or the lecturer will give a lot of more input, more than you guys got earlier. So that there is a context, a cover story, and then teams are starting to work. So that's the first thing, to find out who will take over what role. So usually in a setting of 4 to 5 students, they can also make a decision who will take over the role of the CEO, or who will take over the role of a manufacturing manager or a finance manager. So that's the team building, interfunctional approach. Then when it comes to make the decisions in the teams, that's the soft skill. Also to find out how good teams are working together and how good or poor the collaboration is. So communication plays an important role here. Once the period then is calculated, and I see Angela coming back, so I'm sure she did that already. Yeah. Then we're going to have a reflection, and this also can be used in class or in a subject for an assignment, for a continuous assignment, or for an advanced assignment. Another reflection and awareness then when it comes to start again. So once one period is calculated, usually then you start the next round. And that's very important to keep the motivation level very high. At the end then, apply approved. So that's the learning curve. Once you know how it works, once you know where to look into, you will probably be better and better from round to round. And as I said, this can be done from 4 to 8. There are some simulations with even more than 8 periods, but in education, I wouldn't do more than 8 periods. Now, I hope you got an impression of what it feels like to take on a management role during the breakout session. So what if you could start another round now to see how things are going to develop? That would be great, right? But unfortunately, we don't have the time. Yeah. So I'm sure the competition would heat up then dramatically, and the level of excitement would increase as well. Let me just finalize, and that I wouldn't give any comment on that, but just some feedback on the next slide. So based on a class I just had, I just finished with a couple of weeks ago. So you see, well, a lot of happy people here, a lot of happy students. And that overall, well, one can say that with this, well, interesting teaching and learning style, by using simulations, a curriculum or a module could be even more fun. So thanks very much for this. I will now hand over again to Angela so that we can see some of the results.
Yay. Just quickly validating with Keith that you received the slides by email. And you're muted, I think I saw you say yes. So just making sure.
Yeah, but if I can ask you to share your slide, and then I'll set up for the ones I've got, because I was busy putting Klaus's slides forward.
No, that's perfect. So this is a very high level example of what we would to start doing in a debrief. You remember that cyclical approach. So there's always this, you know, try to make sense of the data and understand what's asked of you. Especially the first round is always an experimental round because you don't really know what's going to happen. That's why this at least 2 or 3 rounds make sense, because there's a lot of, you know, the learning curve is really, really strong, you know, especially after that first round. Still, the debrief is not to be underestimated, because that's really when you pass those messages along, and that debrief needs to be, you know, targeted to the learning objectives to the audience. Of course, the beauties of it, you know, is not that you can, you know, there's almost anything you can pass on as message, depending on you know, what is the conversation, what is the level of the audience that you have in front of you. So I'm just gonna open up those slides that I just created, and hopefully I can share that properly. Here it is. So my slides are opening here, so hopefully it will allow me to share the screen. Okay. Here we go. If I can get a very quick nodding or whatever. Yay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, because, you know, there's only so much you can do with 2 screens. So what I have here, I was kind of just trying to summarize the results. And that's what we usually do in the debrief, in this time that we have in between. And we always preset that, that we kind of say, okay, what is it that we're asking here? The first 2 questions, if you remember, were more like setting the stage questions and asking you about your impressions. Out of the 6 teams that we had 4 teams saying self-driving cars are the future. Yes or no? 4 teams said no, 2 teams said yes. Again, in the debrief, we rarely say one answer is right, one answer is wrong, except it's really financial data where you can say, okay, you are bankrupt, I'm sorry for that. And even then we're going to rescue a team. Here it is really about, you know, driving the message home. What is it that made you say yes or no? What were the data points you were taking for that? What was the conversation you had going on in the team? Very similar to any decision making in real life, right? You need to see, you have the same set of data. We're all looking at the same set of data. Why does that data make you say yes and that data makes you say no? And really try to understand how you can bridge the gap and how you can make sure that they get a more holistic view on the different perspectives, and then take a more probabilistic approach to decision making. So here's that part. In this case, there's no right or wrong. Again, I cannot say, I can say in my simulation, and in my simulation, it's not the future. In my simulation, it takes another decade. So if you want to, you know, say there was certainly 4 teams right and 2 teams wrong, if you want to say it like that, but we generally try to avoid that. Much more interesting when you look at disruptions, how difficult it is to deal with trends and disruptions. Every single one of those trends and disruptions was mentioned in the texts. And, you know, how do you take the hint? Do you take the hint at all? What are your own filters that go into that? We can see a very clear distribution about, not that regulatory and economic and competition are not important. It's just, if you can only choose 2, you'll choose what you feel is, you know, the one that will threaten you the most. So that was kind of the consumer behavior. Data security was what stuck most with the teams as being the, okay, that is where, sorry, pardon my French, shit is gonna hit the fan first. Almost irrelevant here, with innovation following behind. Economic competition, regulatory is certainly a concern, but we cannot focus on that right now. Fantastic way of having a conversation with your participants about, you know, what do you do when disruptions create a perfect storm? How can you make sure your business model withstands, or you have an agile approach in your organization that will help you to adjust course if you need to? Here's about the strategic and operational decisions. Very, very just on the These were the 4 options you had. Back to the basics: fully digital, diversification, divide and conquer. In a real simulation, we got really much into the nitty-gritty of things, meaning what option did you choose and why. We would ask the teams about that. We would show them the financial results and implication of their respective decisions. There again, you were all having the same case study. Don't forget, in a real sim, you would be not only in direct competition with each other, not in independent universes that are parallel. So one decision of one team would directly affect everybody else and vice versa. So the amount of complexity you can represent there in an environment is almost endless. That's why you can fine tune it so well to the learning objectives. We see that if you want to call it a majority, and here is always, that's what I love about Sims, that's why crowdsourcing works. Statistically, there's always the majority that fall on the right solution. In this particular case study, yes, diversification option 1 was the most optimum option. So we have still, statistically represented, that was the one that 2 at least choose out of the 6. Not that the others were wrong, they were just suboptimal. They will still lead you somewhere, but not to the best possible results. Definitely the back to the basics one was the one in this specific case study that was not, it's kind of weighted out in our context. And again, that's the beauty with the Sims. You create the context in any way you want, depending on what message you want to pass across, similar like a game would do. I'm going to stop share because I need to hand it back to Keith, because I have a couple of little things to add. I'm going to try to add them real quick so we have enough time for questions.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Andrea. And thank you everyone who participated there. I'll bring up your next slides, Angela, and share them.
That would be great.
There we are.
So very, very quickly, where does that lead us, and what is some of the messages I want you to walk away with? What you see here is different representations of contexts, of learning contexts. Do you want to show people what KPIs are for, how you can use it, or how choosing the right KPI might be critical? If you want to show people what is it that goes into a change or transformation process, or really make them do it and make them feel it so they understand that from their own perspective, from the competition's perspective, from even the client perspective, make them walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. All these works. You see underneath the different perceptions that English. None of them is right or wrong. It is about trying to see what the others see to get more data points. The more data points you get, the higher the chance that you make, a better business decision. And last but not least is, crisis recovery cycle. I always like that. Almost every business decision kind of goes through that. Rarely you're ahead of the curve. Even that you can try with Sims. But here again, try to see, okay, when stuff happens, how do I react? And what do I learn from that? How savvy am I? Stress testing myself, stress testing my team, stress testing my business model. So that is a few of the things, and there is plenty more, but at least a few that I want to, make you stick with you. If you can move to the next slide, please, Keith, that would be fantastic. There is a tremendous amount of things you make people do with Sims. You see on the right side a kind of radar chart, making them like we did here, give or take, making you rank what is the disruption that you feel is the most relevant and why. Not because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know the answers, but depending on what the assumptions are, it will change your strategy, will send your perception. If you look at the list here, and that was just because I ran out of space on the PowerPoint slide, all the things that you can make people do and create through Sims. Understanding data, business data, but yes, data, and trying to, filter through the noise. experiencing trends and disruptions. You can throw anything. You can even, I think I heard one team say, you can make people die in a sim and nobody really died, but it will create a certain sense of urgency. Strategy setting. How do you even set a strategy when all these things happen? You don't even know how. How do you execute it? Even more tricky. It's one thing to say, this is what I want to do, but then how you're going to do it and how you know that you're on track. Back to the KPIs. Tools, methodologies, anything you want people to try out or do with tools, from something very simple like a SWOT all the way to even a CRM or whatever fantastic software you have for whatever you want to use it. Don't just throw it at people and tell them this is the next best tool and you have to use it. Make them use it in an environment where they can actually, shape it themselves and try it out without, so they can adopt it and they see the difference between this is how we made decisions before using the tool. This is how we make the decisions now. Better? Yes. Okay, cool. Then you have the adoption there. Innovation, wargaming. You can have people throw ideas in there, make an ideation contest, run it through the algorithm and see what comes out of it. Again, not a crystal ball, but gives you, real experience of, oh, wow, I created a new product and look how many people went for that. Awesome, decision-making quality, all these kind of things, leaving those there for you to, it's actually really magical, and it's real because you will see and you can measure those outputs, and that's really fun to do. And on the last slide, I think what I did is, this is some McKinsey, there's very smart people at McKinsey, not only, but very smart people. What I like about this one here is they put out, these are the future skills, the 56 fundamental skills or foundational skills they have identified for the workforce of the future. Every single one of them, I kid you not, you can practice and train with Sims. Pick any one that you like. Resolving conflicts, yes. Empowering, definitely. Achievement orientation, oh yeah. Understanding your own strengths. Whatever you pick in here, I can tell you, even a very simplified simulation environment like the one you just saw will help you tackle those. And you can design the learner experience, the context and everything. It's bespoke, and so it's really, really fun stuff. So I'm just to leave that here for you. Very happy to, now move to the Q&A, and, also take this. I think we have a little bit more time afterwards for coffee if you want to continue in a coffee chat. Well, thank you for listening to us. And now we're handing it over just in case you have questions, either, just asking them, typing in the chat. We'll be very happy to answer them.
Indeed, Angela, thank you very, very much for that. That really put things into perspective, and thanks everyone for taking part in the simulation. I hope you got some flavor there of what your students might go through in something that's part of their education. Does anyone have any questions for us, for Klaus Walter, for Angela Veilfiegel? Any questions about how they might put this into operation themselves? As we know there are lots of simulations out there, but as Angela has shown, actually some of them are, some of the best ones sometimes are written by yourselves. The scenarios that come into your own discipline and really focus on the questions your students need to focus on. So, does anyone like to ask a question?
I have a
yes,
question.
Bea.
I have a question from the perspective of the lecturer or from the perspective of the teacher. So when we have a look at the simulation that we practiced in 20 minutes, and 20 minutes was completely very, very few, so we couldn't have deep knowledge about this display. But if you bring, or if you take this simulation to the classroom, how do you do it? I mean that you give 90 minutes for the students to read everything and then to answer the questions, or you say that it's a home assignment and they have to work together and they have to submit the final answer later. So do they have to do it in the classroom or out of the classroom? And they have more than 2 weeks to make decisions. So how should we imagine this? Thank you.
Fantastic question. I think Klaus referred to it in one of the slides where he talked about different application areas. It's not only that it's suitable for, classroom, blended, or virtual. Also, the modular approach is really flexible. You can do it in 1 or 2 days back to back and have participants be there with you when they make decisions. Super important when you focus on team dynamics. You want to see them, you want to smell them, you want to observe them, or like we did, jump into the breakout rooms if you have to stay virtual. Whatever it is, you want to see those team dynamics live. If it's more, and we usually do that, and I'm going to hand over to Klaus to bring his perspective. If it's students that are on the more operational, really practicing financial skills, and it's a little bit less about, observing them make these decisions, you can absolutely do it synchronized, like we call it, meaning you introduce the case study, you explain the context to them so they understand what they set up with, and then you tell them decisions are due by next Wednesday midnight. And whatever they feel like doing in between, that's for them to organize. You will have the same distribution as always, 20% not doing it, and then 5 minutes before the assignment, just clicking on decisions, 30-40% being, really putting on a decent effort, and the eager beavers, which are really going to push it. You will see that in the decision quality, I guarantee you, because there's no dumb block that will get you through a complex simulation. So yes, you can do either or depending on what time you have with them, but you can put a lot of things as synchronized. And Klaus, I saw you nod.
Yeah. So what I can add is you should be very honest to your students, because they have to read a lot of stuff. So usually I'm uploading the so-called participants manual and with the cover story and some more instructions to the virtual learning platform, which could be Moodle or another one, prior to the first lecture. So then as it's very often the case, only half of the class is really reading that. So on the first lecture, then you have a kind of a slide deck with an introduction, so that you don't really start playing the first round in the first lecture, or not even in the second one. So I'm usually having 3 to 4 lectures before the students will really start. And then, as Angela said, it's never good to have everything done in class, so that on a weekly basis, so usually you see your class every week, once a week, you give a deadline, and so that they have to be done with the decision making then at a certain date. And as I also said earlier, this is a cumulative approach. So the complexity level will be increasing from week to week. So there's even more to read. If you like, you can even create a complete annual report with balance sheets, with an income statement, a cash flow statement, and a full set of key performance indicators. And that's again a lot of things to read. So that's the challenge here to have students working on a high motivation level, but that comes automatically. As I said, once you're done with the first round, or after the second financial year or business year, usually the competition is heating up dramatically, and then each and everyone will be motivated, will be engaged, and at the end they will all be satisfied.
And if I can add in there, they will also take less and less time to make their decisions as the rounds progress, so that you can add other decisions in later rounds to add that complexity, because they've got used to doing the easy decisions, as it were. Okay,
and maybe also to be conscious of everybody's time. And one thing I want to send away, it might look more scary and complicated than it actually is. Once you know, the first time you use a sim, it might feel a little bit overwhelming. Once you see how engaging and how fun and how much more, you know, tangible your topic becomes, you usually get pretty much addicted to that, like you would with games, and you stick to it. And so don't be afraid of walking the mile and getting there, because the reward is just so worth it.
Okay, let me share with you the contact details of, say, Rob, who couldn't be with us today, but our other two presenters, Angela and Klaus. If you want to get in touch with them, the details are. These will be on a recording of this workshop that you'll be sent a link to in due course in the next few days. So I'd like to thank you very much. If you have to go now, please feel free to depart, but we will be online for another 15 minutes to take any other queries that you may have. The final slide to share with you is our next formal meeting as an EOCCS learning community, which is our annual symposium, online again. And because we're online, geography doesn't matter. And we are hosted by 3 virtual hosts, one from Moscow, one from Barcelona, and one from Bogota. Wish us luck and be there with us to see just what online learning around the world is like. Thank you very much, everyone. If you need to go, please don't let us stop you. But for now, thank you very much for attending, and we'll be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Yeah, and I don't know if Selena is still there. I answered your question in the chat, but also very happy to take it offline. Yeah,
yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. So Selena asked the question maybe for everybody else's benefit, because it's a great question. Lots of from-the-shelf simulations out there. What do you recommend from the shelf versus bespoke? I'm a very pragmatic person. I would say 90% of all learning objectives can be done by any from-the-shelf simulation, because it doesn't really matter. Sometimes even good to take people out of the environment that they think they're in, even on professional training. When I have bankers in my trainings, I usually make them do an insurance sim or even a manufacturing sim, because then you even the playing field. Because otherwise they will come with their big boots of, well, I already know that industry, and that sim is not exactly like reality is, just to bypass the learning because they don't want to admit that they don't know. Fantastic way of throwing them all in the same sim and be like, last time healthcare company, what we did is an e-scooter simulation. You can be quite sure that nobody in healthcare has ever seen e-scooters before or know the mechanics. Fantastic if you want to tackle those skills and really pass those messages. If and only if you have either or a very large audience, meaning you have like thousands of people over several years you want to send through a sim, go through the effort of building a customized one, because if you spread out those costs, even if it looks astronomical at the beginning, but divide 250,000 by 100,000 and you'll see that, at the end of the day, the cost per user is zero almost. So in that case, yes, a bespoke one is really cool. Or if you have a very, very specific topic, industry segment, or learning goal, very much into this is our industry, this is our unique business model, we need to model this, otherwise in that case, yes, then the effort makes sense. In all other cases, find yourself the tool of choice. There's so many sims out there. It's really more about how you put it in motion in the classroom or in the training than about the actual content. You can literally run an Excel model behind it. It does not matter, because not all that is glitter is gold and vice versa. It is about the experience created around it, the context you're setting, and those learning goals you put, and these debriefs. Whatever runs as an engine behind it, most of the time, people will buy into the story no matter what if you do it right.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many people, but I wonder if Klaus and Angela, you could tell us about one of the things higher education teachers need to think about is assessment. If this is part of the curriculum, You know, you really can't assess the winning team or, you know, as part of the assessment. So what are the variety of things you can do for assessment?
It's a great question. Honestly, simulation results per se, and Klaus might contradict that, but I would never take the simulation result per se as you completed the course or not, because it depends on so many variables, and what you really want people there is to learn. So if you judge them by have you achieved it, you know, you lose everybody else that didn't, but maybe these people learn so much more than the ones that achieve it from the top, from the beginning. So it's the things that you build around the exercise that I would recommend for judging, meaning assiduity, meaning how much work did they put into it, and you will see it, believe me, you immediately know. Most of the sims, the really good ones especially, track the time that people spend on the exercise. Fantastic way of knowing, you know, because they don't know that you're tracking them, but it gives you an indication, does the team take that seriously? Observing them, how they overcome a conflict, or how they overcome you know, especially maybe sometimes they go bankrupt, they have a difficulty, did they overcome it or did they give up? You know, and you know, ask them to reflect, the quality of their reflection, ask them to hand in a paper and say, this is what I learned out of this. You want to judge anything, judge what they really learned out of it and how they formulate that, how smart they got about the, yes, this was a disaster, but this is why we're taking this away, and this is why never that disaster will happen again in our real lives, because that's, you want to set them up for success in real life. So that's what I would recommend, not using a sim for, you know, tracking financial results or giving a winner. But again, Klaus might have a little bit of a different perspective.
Well, just a little bit. So the simulations are suitable to continuous assessments. So that works pretty well. And usually I'm having 3 to maximum of 4 parts in that, which could be a team presentation, or a, well, once you have that on a full semester, you can, well, ask the students to prepare a team report after 6 weeks, which will be graded then. Maybe that's 30% of their overall marks. And then the presentation, and finally I'm doing an individual reflection report based on the role each and every student took within the team. So it's not a good idea to let them sit an exam on that. That's definitely not a good idea. But with the CA, that works pretty well. And well, a little bit, I do a little bit differently, Angela. So I'm having the result of the teams as a minor part of the grades. So I'm usually having, well, that within the team presentation. So once there is a team presentation, which is worth 30 or 40% of the overall marks, then a component of that 40 to 30% is the result. So even if a team goes bankrupt, they won't fail the whole module, and that is important. Otherwise, I think that would be demotivating.
Sure. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I noticed that Angelo was speaking to us earlier about the soft skills. Does that answer that Klaus and Angela gave, does that tally with your experience, Angelo?
Yes, what I heard is pretty familiar to me, because as a matter of fact, you have to push on the intrinsic motivation in order to make people play the simulation and learn something. So they even if it is the best simulation in the world, but the person or the learner is not motivated for some reason, the simulation doesn't work. So there is the need of a context, as Angela said. So you need to prepare the context and to give the people the motivation to learn. Exactly. And then, of course, in terms of assessment, again, yes, Klaus said very well that you can chunk assessment in different times you can do it in different periods during the learning experience that could last very long, could last even months. And usually for doing this, it is because you are preparing projects aside. So again, what said Angela is that actually you set activities, you set tasks that are connected to the simulation, and then you see what the people are doing. And so this is what exactly we were doing, and I'm still doing with the proper projects now. So observing over time, this is the way also where you can observe behavioral change, when you can measure level 3 of Kirkpatrick Phillips evaluation model, you know, just to see if there is a change over time. And for soft skills, this is exactly the way that you have to work, because and you can also add maybe a platform, a collaborative platform, in order to support like this, like Zoom, like just using breakout rooms in order to support the learning. And you can add other things. You can add whiteboards, online whiteboards, like a mirror and mural, so that you can have a collaboration online synchronously, or even asynchronously. So
yes, you say that as Angela said in her input, there are so many different things that this touches on. And one of them really links to the last webinar we had about building relationships internationally, which is what a lot of business schools strive to do. And this is a way in which you can, set up a simulation that works well, and then collaborate with other universities, with similar schools, with similar cohorts, and have your students interact with them. They will get the timing problems, the world clock problems, the language problems, all of those things that they will encounter in their careers. So I do myself, a great fan of simulations, however they're done, but I'm so pleased that we're sort of pushing this to the online community to bring quality to online provision. Does anyone else have any other thing before we sign off? It's been great meeting
Celine,
you. Yes,
here
please,
I have
Celine.
one last question. I may have missed the answer to Daniel's question. Is there a website somewhere that we can review the bank of simulations that's available in the market? Because for me, right, as a corporate university, corporate learning facility, the simulations is half the success when the learners go through experience, but the other critical success factor is actually the debrief. Just like reading a Harvard case, for example, the debrief, the impact is equally important to the learner's journey. So I'm just wondering if there's some database or a website that ranks or available to public on the different SIMs available, and then what are the teachers' notes, for example, in teaching all these SIMs?
That would be, I don't know of one. I don't know if Angela or Klaus know of one, but I don't know.
I wish there was such a thing and somebody actually did the work, because that would save me a lot of pain trying to select the right tool. For the last 15 years, Klaus and I have worked specifically not only on developing SIMs with and for organizations, but also working with the top 3 or 4 simulation providers. And there is, that's where really there's the essence. And we've been to so many fairs, so we've seen a lot, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think the easiest is sometimes if you tell us, it's the banking industry looking for the financial service industry, I can certainly tell you the top 2 or 3 I have heard of. I would also say, I think I know the top 3 or 4 simulation providers, and they're really, you know, on the one hand, you kind of know who they are, and, you know, everybody else, again, it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that, you know, it's like a tool of choice. Choose your poison or choose your weapon. If you're really used to something and you know for that learning skill it works, any ranking, like with the university ranking, you know how that is. It gets biased by whatever you're looking for in the ranking. So I would more go for, if you have a university that works with Sims or have a provider that works with Sims in a specific industry segment, ask them, because you can be sure they have done the due diligence and they have walked around to see what is out there and what they can leverage and use.
And I think unfortunately, Rob wasn't with us today, but Rob goes under the online name of Professor Game. So he is an expert in this field, and I'm sure he would, you know, from the top of his head, be able to tell you the different simulations and games that are available. But it seems to me this is something that, you know, this community, the EFMD online community, could well share their experiences, and we could be a central repository for those, you know, just really just a sort of a chat room. So people can look at these and get the feedback on them, and to know basic things like pricing. You know, that can very often be the thing that stops a university doing this at all, because the licensing costs so much. But you know, compare it to running a full lecture series, and it becomes very favorable. But you know, you have to have that argument within your own institution to get it up and running. Okay, we've come to the end of our allotted time. Thank you so much for staying with us, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for your sharing.
Thank you, particularly Angela and Klaus and Teresa, for your administration of this. And we'll see you next time. We will advertise, as usual, what our next seminars and webinars will be. But say our next meeting is our symposium at the end of September, where we've got a whole host of other things that we're going to share. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
And bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.